welcome back to the Time to Thrive podcast. We are continuing our patience series for this month, and today we're going to be studying our couple in the Bible, which is Ruth and Boaz. I'm very excited for this one. It's a story that we all know pretty well, but I think we don't really look at it from this perspective of having patience, and specifically patience in marriage and relationships. So I think this is going to be very beneficial to everyone. So if you missed our last episode, definitely go back and listen to it or watch it on YouTube. And we were talking about Romans 12:12 and that verse, and how it's very important to have patience during hard times, and how we can do that as Christians, especially staying persistent in prayer and having hope in God and trusting Him. So definitely go back and watch that episode. But today we're going to look at Ruth and Boaz's story. We're going to be at a couple different places in the Book of Ruth, and so we'll have those referenced if you want to go back and study on your own, which we definitely recommend. So starting with Ruth, just a little background about her is at the beginning of the Book of Ruth, we see that she was very heartbroken because not too far into the Book of Ruth, she lost her homeland and left it. She lost her husband and then left with her mother-in-law, Naomi, and they traveled to her hometown. But she was still committed, because we see in chapter 1, verse 16 and 17, that she says, "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Which is really important to look at this, because Ruth she was a Moabite, so she wasn't a Jew, she wasn't a follower of God yet, but she believed in Naomi and her God, and chose to stick with her despite all the uncertainty that she knew. And so, even though she didn't have the immediate answers or know what decisions to make, she chose to be patient and to have faith. And she waited and worked humbly in the fields, and then trusted God even in uncertainty. And then looking at Boaz, we see that Ruth meets Boaz while working in the fields. And in Ruth chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, Boaz, speaking to Ruth, says, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully reported to me. May the Lord reward you for what you have done." And so we see that Boaz notices Ruth's character, not just her appearance. And so when Ruth approaches Boaz in chapter 3, he responds with honor and patience. And instead of rushing into their relationship, we see that he properly followed the right steps to redeem her rather than being selfish. And so we both see, and Ruth and Boaz show a very good picture that patience is not passive, because we see that both of them, with each of their stories, they were both faithful in small things while they were waiting for big things. So that's just a little touch on it. Definitely go back and study the Book of Ruth on your own, because there's so much to learn. But we're just going to dive into patience in their relationship and patience in Christian relationships.
Yes. So one of the things that was highlighted when I was doing my study through Ruth, if you haven't read the Book of Ruth before, it's only 4 chapters, super easy. You can put it on your bedside table and it'll read through in like 10-15 minutes. It will not be long at all. It's a really interesting story. I was actually going to bring my old Bible that I have that is literally falling apart, because I had it all scraped up, because that was one of the first books that I studied when I got my Bible a couple years after I got saved. So Ruth is definitely super interesting story, and it's full of not just one of the cutest love stories and greatest love stories that we see in the Bible. It also encompasses God's love and Him redeeming us as His people. So one of the things, like I said, that was highlighted to me was waiting on God's timing. So with Ruth and her mother-in-law,
Naomi.
I get the name mixed up. Naomi. So with her and her mother-in-law, it was in a season definitely of waiting. And, she went to live with her mother-in-law. She took care of her mother-in-law. She worked hard. Like Haelle said, Boaz recognized not only her beauty, but her character, her hard-working willingness to take care of her mother-in-law. So that was noticed by Boaz. But waiting on God's timing and not rushing into the relationship, like you said, but she was faithful to serve while she was waiting. She was faithful to trust God while she was in a time of waiting. And she knew, ultimately, her mother-in-law knew that God would provide no matter what happened. So that's one of the things that was highlighted to me, is sometimes it can feel like God is delaying when we're praying of like what's going on. We see the mother-in-law, Naomi. There we go. Naomi. Naomi was in a time of, she was heartbroken as well. Her husband had passed away, and then her 2 sons had passed away, and it ultimately left Ruth and her mother-in-law to cling to each other, take care of each other. So they were both going through a hard time, and sometimes it seems like the Lord is delaying, or he's not hearing us when we're praying, or acknowledging that we're struggling, but ultimately our waiting is for a greater purpose. And I'm going to wait to say it after, but there was a really, really cool thing that happened through Ruth and Boaz's relationship, and ultimately it impacted the future now. So that was one of the things that I noticed, was how important it was to wait on God's timing.
Looking at patience in Christian relationships versus worldly relationships, I kind of, when I was studying, I was comparing and contrasting the two. And one thing that I took from Ruth and Boaz's story is biblical patience is active and not passive. It doesn't just sit and wait, but it prays, obeys, and trusts. And because we see that Ruth worked faithfully while waiting, and then Boaz acted honorably when the time was right. He waited till the right time. And then we also see that biblical patience honors God and the other person. It doesn't manipulate or pressure or rush. It walks in grace and truth, whereas worldly patience often centers around what I want when I want it. Like we talked in our last episode, we mentioned how in society everything is very much, I want to get it when I want it. We're not very patient people, but we're human. We make mistakes, but then that's where God's grace comes in.
Yeah. Speaking on the trusting part, one of the really cool things that, even when I did the study when I was younger, going behind people, I was like, this is so interesting. And we see the Lord do it a lot, is using people who are totally unexpected. You can see it in every single one of the disciples, totally unexpected people. You can see it even in Moses. God uses totally unexpected people to make incredible things happen. And this is important in our lives as well. He can use ordinary people to accomplish his will. So ultimately, through Boaz and Ruth both trusting God, being obedient to the Lord, trusting God's plan for your life is more than just the here and now. It's ultimately trusting God with the future. So you can be in a time of waiting, be in a time of struggling, and it's not just trusting him just in the here and now. It's trusting him with your future, what's going to happen tomorrow, trusting him with that. And we see that when Ruth and Boaz did get married, when they had a son, it was really cool. So the son, hang on, I have it. So Boaz, when they got married, they had a son. Boaz was the father of Obed, and then Obed was the father of Jesse, and then Jesse was the father of King David. And then we know that Jesus came from the line of King David. That was prophecy fulfilled in the Old Testament. And so Ruth had this incredible heartbreak that was happening. She trusted the Lord. She was a faithful worker. Boaz's kindness towards Ruth ultimately resulted in a beautiful marriage built on patience and obedience to the Lord and trusting God. And then what came after that is so cool, that they were able to be in that line with King David, able to have, one day have David in that line, and then Jesus came from the line of David. So I was like, that is so interesting how it all correlates back. Yeah.
Do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so.
Kind of just touching on what we talked in the last part too. Kind of going off of what you said. Looking at Ruth and Boaz's story, we see how their waiting wasn't wasted, and then we see how God redeemed it at the end, how he blessed them for their faithfulness, because waiting isn't a time where we just sit and just go, okay, well, this is it. It's a time where we can be proactive. We can get closer to God. We can strengthen our faith. Waiting builds character, and it prepares us for what God has in store for us after the waiting season. So I think this story is a good reminder of staying faithful in the small things, because we see how it impacts things in the future, and how it makes it a little bit easier to then be faithful and wait for big things.
Yeah, and I think our society loves to talk about love. We love love, but we often don't see true love on display in our societies as well. But in this story, we're able to see true love on display, and it shows not just like the beautiful, oh, like this is, a cute rom-com. It shows true love on display, which love is sacrifice, it's patience with each other. It's on full display in this story. And we see that ultimately Boaz's love and kindness and gentleness in redeeming Ruth and her family ultimately shows what Christ did for us on the cross, redeeming us, loving us unconditionally, the sacrifice that he made and the patience he had with pursuing each one of us. So I thought that was really interesting how God ultimately shows us these amazing stories, shows us his character through it, people's character through it, but he also puts details in there showing himself through that, what Christ did on the cross before they even knew who Jesus Christ was. So I thought that was really interesting, and it's always encouraging when you're able to look into scripture, being able to see who God is in that scripture, being able to get to know him more in his character, but then also how you're able to apply it into your own life, of knowing that the Lord is good and he will use your waiting for something that you probably can't even imagine. So trusting him not just in the here and now, but ultimately trusting him in the future. Yeah. Well, I guess we are going to wrap it up. I love studying this. I think it's really nice. We hear the stories, like you said. Most of us know this story really, really well. But when you're actually sitting down having to study it, it's totally different.
Yeah.
So if y'all find anything as you're studying, like I said, it's a short book. It's really, really interesting if you just want to read through it. And following behind some people is really interesting too. So, yeah. Do you have anything to close? No? I'll let you close.
Okay. We will see you in the next episode, but if you will like and subscribe, leave a comment, share this with a friend, we would love to engage with you and hear from you, and we will look forward to seeing you next week on our next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.